He was only a boy, small in years but carrying a weight no child should ever bear. In a courtroom filled with cold stares and silent judgment, he stood where grown men trembled, before the judge's bench. Not as a witness, not as a defendant, but as his mother's only hope. What led him there was not chance, but a chain of injustice stretching far beyond one family. And when he finally spoke, the room fell silent. The real question is, why did no one stop it sooner? Before that unforgettable day in court, he was simply a child trying to navigate a world that often seemed stacked against him. 12 years, old, with a backpack that carried more responsibility than books. He walked to school each morning past cracked sidewalks and weary faces that told stories of struggle. His mother worked long hours at a diner, her hands rough from endless shifts, her smile worn but never broken. She was his anchor, his reason to push forward, even when the world seemed determined to hold them back. At home, their apartment was small but alive with warmth, hand-me-down furniture, the smell of home-cooked meals stretched from scraps, and laughter filling spaces where money could not. To neighbors, they were just another family trying to survive. To him, his mother was more than a parent. She was a fighter. And like all fighters, she had enemies, though hers were not individuals but a system that rarely showed mercy to people who looked like them. He didn't know it yet, but all those quiet evenings helping her read through bills, watching her juggle impossible choices, were preparing him for a moment that would test the very core of who he was. Because soon, he would step into a place no child belonged and face a truth no family should ever endure. The moment everything began to unravel didn't look dramatic at first. It started with a notice. One more slip of paper slid under their apartment door, demanding money they didn't have. Rent was overdue. Fees were piling up. And the landlord, backed by the system, wasn't interested in excuses. For his mother, it was another battle in a long war. For him, it was the first sign that their lives were about to be ripped apart. Soon came the knock at the door, loud, cold, and final. Officials stood outside with stern faces and legal documents that carried the weight of a world his mother could not fight alone. He watched as she tried to explain, her voice trembling but steady, insisting she had paid what she could, promising to catch up. But explanations rarely mattered when skin color and poverty intersected. To them, she was just another tenant in a low-income building, another case to process. The eviction wasn't just about losing a home. It was about losing dignity. He saw the way neighbors watched, how whispers followed them as boxes were carried out. Yet what hurt him most wasn't the eviction itself. It was the way officials treated his mother, as if she were invisible, as if her years of sacrifice meant nothing. That image was seared into his mind, fueling a fire he didn't yet understand. But worse was still to come. Soon papers arrived summoning his mother to court. A landlord backed by powerful lawyers against a single mother with no money, no legal training, and no one to stand beside her, except him. At first, he thought he could only watch from the sidelines, another silent witness to injustice, but night after night he saw her at the kitchen table, squinting at paperwork she could barely understand, her hands trembling over debts and legal jargon. And each night, something inside him grew. He began reading with her, sounding out the words, piecing together fragments of law from the scraps of information they could find at the library. He was only 12, but he was learning fast, not just about the law, but about survival. The day of the hearing arrived. Their clothes were plain, their faces weary, but they walked into that courthouse with their heads high. The building loomed, like a monument to power, marble floors echoing under their small footsteps. Lawyers in tailored suits brushed past them without a glance. Every detail told them they didn't belong here. When they entered the courtroom, he expected to sit quietly, in the back. But then the bailiff called their case, and his mother, trembling but determined, nudged him forward. The judge looked down, confused. A boy stood where no boy should ever stand. And in that moment, as silence filled the room, everyone wondered the same thing. What could a child possibly say in a place like this? The courtroom was still, every breath hanging heavy in the air as the boy stepped forward. He was barely tall enough to see over the podium, his hands gripping the edge for balance. The judge's eyes narrowed, confusion giving way to skepticism. Lawyers smirked, papers shuffled, and whispers rippled across the gallery. A child, standing in place of a lawyer. To them, it was laughable. To him, it was everything. His voice trembled at first, but then it grew steadier. He spoke of his mother's late nights, her endless shifts, and the pennies stretched into meals. He read from the papers they had studied together, pointing out mistakes the landlord's lawyers thought no one would notice. He wasn't trained, and he wasn't polished, but he was raw, unfiltered truth. And in that truth, the courtroom grew uneasy. Yet for every word he spoke, resistance pushed back harder. The landlord's attorney objected, sneering that this was ridiculous. The judge shifted uncomfortably, torn between procedure and the undeniable humanity in front of him. The boy's mother sat silently, her eyes brimming with tears, not of defeat, but of pride. And then came the moment that cut through the room like a blade. He turned to the judge, his voice breaking but fierce. "If no one will fight for her, then I will, because she is my mother, and she deserves justice." The silence that followed was suffocating. No one dared move. For a second, it seemed the entire weight of the system pressed down on this boy, ready to crush him, to remind him he did not belong. But in that stillness, a shift began. The case was no longer about contracts or rent. It was about something deeper, something undeniable. The question hung unspoken in the air. Would justice finally listen? Or would the system break him too? The judge sat in silence, the weight of the boy's words hanging in the air. For the first time that day, the smirks faded and the whispers stopped. This was no ordinary case anymore. It had become a mirror reflecting something larger, something uncomfortable. Slowly, the judge ruled to halt the eviction, citing irregularities in the landlord's claims. For one moment, justice bent toward mercy. The boy and his mother walked out of that courtroom still poor, still struggling, but not defeated. Yet the truth remained. It should never have taken a child to expose what adults ignored. His courage brought them a temporary reprieve, but it also revealed something deeper, how the system often forces the most vulnerable to fight battles they should never have to face. A 12-year-old had done what lawyers and leaders so often fail to do: demand dignity for the people who need it most. For the boy, that day left an imprint no victory could erase. He had seen power up close, its cruelty, its indifference, but also its potential to bend under pressure. He carried that memory forward, not as a triumph, but as a reminder of how fragile justice can be. And as for us, the question lingers. Why does it take stories like his to make us see what's broken? Why must innocence stand trial just to be heard? Because this isn't just his story. It's the story of countless families silenced by poverty, by prejudice, by a system that still struggles to treat everyone equally. So ask yourself, when the next child is forced to fight for justice that should have been theirs all along, will we finally be ready to listen? If this story moved you, share it so others can hear the truth. Don't just watch, be part of the change.